This is Shiting welcoming you to Backstage, the life behind the music. This is an online series of conversations with pianists, an exploration of their remarkable artistic lives as performers, teachers, and advocates for music. Through talking, I hope to shed some light on their process, to get a glimpse into some of their music making, the real work that takes place before they or their students step out onto the stage. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today, and thank you for taking time from your busy schedule. And I have to say congratulations first on your CD. I saw that you have a recording album coming out with Steinway and by the works of Hummel and this Italian composer Roberto Piana. Can you talk a little bit about your recording?
Thank you very much. Well, I have to correct one thing. This upcoming release is not for a CD. It is for Steinway, but for Spirio. So this one is for the Spirio library. I do also record CDs that sometimes are issued by the Steinway label, but these two pieces, I have recorded all the sonatas of Hummel. There is 9 of them for Centaur Records. And actually, the third volume is coming out in a few days, August 21st, with sonatas number 4 and 6, two very big sonatas. This sonata is number 2, opus 13, beautiful earlier work that I played for the Spirio piano, and they are releasing it on the Spirio catalog. And the same with Roberto Piana, the 25 pictorial Preludes. This is a work that I really truly love. I had already also recorded it on CD for Centaur Records years ago, and this time I recorded it for the Spirio. It's a different medium, but it's still very exciting, and I'm very happy. It's available now. It's already out. Those who own the Spirio catalog, or if people visit Steinway halls all over the world, they have like access to all the music in the Spirio library, and it's a huge library.
That's wonderful. I have to say, I am not very familiar with the composer Roberto Piana. And can you talk a little bit about this preludes that he writes?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I met Roberto online when I was already living here in the United States. And I stumbled upon one of his own recordings, because he's also an excellent pianist. And he was playing one of his own compositions. It was Hommage à Turina, this 3-movement suite for piano. And I really fell in love with the piece and with his musicianship and, creativity. So then I needed to play, I wanted to play something new for festival, Liszt Festival in San Francisco. And I asked him if he was willing to write a piece that was going to be a tribute to Liszt, since I had listened to this tribute to Turina. And he came up with a great piece, fun and ingenious and very imaginative, called Après une lecture de Liszt. So instead of after a reading of Dante, he named it after a reading of Liszt. And it's wonderful piece that I performed there and then also recorded and played many times. From that moment, this was maybe 2012, we have collaborated on a number of projects. I always ask him if he wants to collaborate with me on projects. Like when I recorded a CD for the Steinway label, I had done arrangements of Poulenc songs, and I wanted to couple them with songs of Edith Piaf, the very famous French singer. So I thought this needs to be beyond an arrangement. It needs to be really a rethinking and elaborating on the originals. And so I needed a real composer, as I like to say. And so I asked Roberto, and he came up with these incredibly beautiful elaborations on those songs. The same thing happened when I wanted to record an entire CD of classical Neapolitan songs. The ones that we are more or less familiar with through the tenors, the interpretation of those very famous singers, Caruso, Pavarotti, etc. And so he and I chose 20 of them, and then he made incredibly beautiful piano elaborations of those, and I recorded them for the Steinway label. These preludes, he had composed before he and I met, and I just fell in love with them because they are an amazing work. They work on so many different levels. There is a lot of styles in there. It goes from the sacred to the secular, because each prelude is inspired by a painting, and some of the paintings are religious in character, or in subject, I should say, and some are not. But it's definitely a work that is worth playing or listening to.
Recording of the song arrangements, song transcription, I love very much. The transcription you had of songs are so evocative and they're beautiful. And I would like to ask you, do you do a lot of piano transcriptions and arrangement yourself? And what is it about arranging that you like?
I didn't do that much. I mean, until now, I've arranged these 14 songs of Poulenc that went into that CD where Roberto arranged 10 songs of Edith Piaf. And there is actually two more pieces on that CD, but one is original for piano. It's the link between Poulenc and Piaf. It is the solo improvisation called Hommage à Edith Piaf. And that's already a solo piece that Poulenc wrote. And the other one is a waltz called Les Chemins de l'Amour, which actually does not need to be arranged. If you play just the piano part without the vocal line, because the piano part doubles exactly the vocal line, so you can just play it as is, you don't need to arrange it. But anyway, so I had done those. I have arranged the vocalise of Rachmaninoff, which has already been, I've already recorded on a Rachmaninoff album. And I had arranged an arrangement of Libertango by Piazzolla that Roberto Piana arranged for piano four hands. Then I took that and I made my own spin on it by making it for piano solo and also by changing a few things here and there. So it's fun, you know, it's like you manipulate the music, you make it your own, you break it apart, then put it back together. It's wonderful. Usually transcriptions are of lighter fare, but of course there are exceptions, and we have notable exceptions, like for example the Cortot transcription of Franck Violin Sonata. And recently I did something similar to that in scope and in difficulty, the Respighi Violin Sonata in B minor. This is a piece I had been performing and I've recorded with a violinist, and I've always felt it could be a great piece for piano. Difficult to be sure, but it works, I think. As a matter of fact, you know, I made the transcription now that I've had the time during this pandemic. I made the time to do it, and I've actually also had time to learn how to play it because it's super difficult. And I recorded it, and it was premiered for the opening recital of the San Jose International Piano Competition summer workshop just last week. And it's actually now available on my YouTube page. So if people are curious, they can go listen. I mean, I think it's great music to begin with. And I have to love the music, otherwise I have no interest. That's obvious. Then when I feel this itch, because I think that the music can be great for piano solo, then, you know, I just start thinking about it. And I'm glad when things work out that I can do it.
On top of making so many recordings and so many projects, I know you're also a very active performer. And after you won the Cleveland International Piano Competition, Cliburn competition, you probably had a lot of engagements and coming in your way. And how did you manage to learn so many rep in a short amount of time? What is the process?
Well, obviously, when you are winning competitions, you have to be ready to start performing the day after. And literally, this is what happened, especially after the Cliburn. But the repertoire, you know, if it's all a matter of balancing things. If you have a good pool of solo pieces to draw from to start, and then you don't get stuck on those, you keep learning how to you know, delve deeper into them when you perform them, but at the same time on the road you learn new music. So instead of always trying to rehearse the same music that you performed at night, during the day maybe you carve out a few hours to learn new repertoire. And I've done that a lot, especially the first several years that I was touring. You know, until your repertoire gets large enough that you know you have more to draw from. But it's all a matter of balance, and then it depends, because it depends how long it takes you to learn and memorize things. I've always been a fast learner, but at the same time, I think it's just a matter of balancing things carefully. That's all.
Mhm. What advices do you give to your students when your students are preparing for a big, important competition like this? What do you say to them when they are under such pressure?
Well, we could have an entire 1 hour at least conversation just on this subject. But the point is, I think the best advice I can give my students was the same advice I received and the same advice I kept repeating to myself. Don't go into a competition thinking of competing. Go into a competition thinking you have a large pool of pieces you have to play, and they are performances. You have an audience, play for the audience, play to the audience, not to the jury. And that's not to say you don't think about the jury. Think of the jury as an extension of the audience. They are there to, of course, rank you or judge you or vote upon what you do, and you know, they may like it, dislike it, but you shouldn't be affected by that. You shouldn't even think about that. And then the other thing is, don't think about competing against anybody, because this is really nonsense. We do things that don't have any parameters. It's all subjective anyway. So try to compete against yourself to play as best you can and to even play better than you can, because of the adrenaline and the moment, the energy of the moment. That's the best advice. The other advice, and there is of course a lot more, but it's not just competitions, but when you have a competition that forces you to be ready with such a vast amount of pieces in a short time, um, have everything you know you're going to have to play, from first to last round. Have it ready, perfectly ready, at best as you can, at least 1 month before the competition starts. So 1 month before, you have to pretend the competition starts the day after. And then, if you have that, you have the luxury of actually putting things to rest for a few days and starting to rotate them. So you don't actually go insane practicing 12 hours a day. It's detrimental to get into a competition when you're practicing 12 hours a day. I always share with students this experience I've had personally. When I was preparing the Marguerite Long competition in Paris, I was practicing 10, 11 hours a day. And I got stuck on the beginning of a Mozart sonata, the Mozart sonata in F major, 332. I couldn't play it anymore. My fingers wouldn't move. My brain would freeze. I couldn't phrase it. It's apparently so simple. Of course we know it's not. But I couldn't find the phrasing. I was so depressed, so disgusted at myself. I decided I wouldn't do the competition. I decided I wouldn't do anything for a while. So I didn't play for a couple of days, and then well, I sat down at the piano again and I started playing, and not only that piece but everything else. The requirements were huge. It was a humongous competition, so many rounds, so much music. All of a sudden, things started clicking and I could play them well, and I don't know why. And actually, I do know why, but at the time I didn't know. It was because I didn't touch the piano for 2 or 3 days, and my brain kept processing things, and I slept more. And so I woke up one day and everything worked. So you need to have the luxury. You cannot keep cramming things into your brain until the very last minute. So there is more, of course, but these are the probably the most important points that I can make with students.
Yeah, I think that's very important to also pay attention to your own mental health when you're preparing
Oh
something
yeah,
such stressful level.
yeah.
I noticed that when you're playing, you have such an unusual consistency and control of sound. I was wondering if you could describe how you achieve that and how do you practice that?
Well, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you. Um, I don't know that I practice specifically for that. Of course, I mean, when you think of music, music is polyphonic. All music is polyphonic. Or do you want to say 99.999 periodic is polyphonic? Yes. So when you start thinking about parts, different parts, then you start thinking about different people playing together. So those are your fingers. They're different individuals trying to make music together. And then you start thinking about lines horizontally. And then you start thinking about how do they stack up? but you still feel and perceive them and try to hear them individually. So you go for transparency. And I have to say, I mean, this is a very easy thing to process mentally. We can all relate to this. We can all understand it. It's not sometimes so easy to do. You do need to have a starting point where your finger independence is there so that you can differentiate the sounds and everything you do. And you can layer carefully. But I feel that I was given good instruction when I was young because I was asked to play a ton, and I really mean a ton of Bach since I was very, very young. I started playing the music of Bach when I was 4. And of course, you start from the easy things that you can manage. But this has been a constant in my life. And when I was a student, up until the moment I ceased being a student, I was playing all 48 preludes and fugues of the Well-Tempered Clavier. And there is no better gym you can go to learn how to think and how to play than that, especially when you then can work on it with the greatest teachers. And I was really lucky in that respect.
Can you talk a little more about your experience studying with Aldo Cicolini and Paul Badura-Skoda?
Sure, but I have to say, with Paul Badura-Skoda, I only did, it was wonderful and very influential, but he wasn't my teacher in the traditional sense. I only did several master classes with him, but several that were all so important to me. But time-wise, it was very concentrated. With Cicolini, I studied for almost 2 years, and then the third person should actually be the first one I mentioned. A very, very wonderful musician, a lady from Napoli, from Naples. Her name is Anna Maria Pennella. She was a student of Marguerite Long and also for a brief time a student of Michelangelo. Very sadly, of course, all of these masters have now passed away. But I did take a lot from them. And with Miss Pennella, I studied with her for 4 or 5 years. And she is really probably my biggest influence in music. She is the first person who really spurred me to think as a composer and to think as a conductor when I was playing. Cicolini, of course, you have the luxury of studying with him. All you have to do is sit close by him when he plays, and you sort of learn by osmosis. He played everything, first of all. I mean, I remember, there is not one single piece I played for him, and I played a lot of music that he couldn't play perfectly, and he wasn't practicing that stuff. I remember once I was playing some Etude Tableau of Rachmaninoff, and I played it for him, and he was talking about some things, and then he said, let me see if I can show you. And he sat down and played through the whole thing beautifully, perfectly. And I said, like, Aldo, you told me you don't like to play Rachmaninoff too much. When did you learn this music? Or when did you play? And he was like, I looked at it once, maybe 30 years ago. So things like that. So he was like an incredible talent. But aside from that, what I call the amazing circus act he could pull off, there was the substance of the musician and the idea and the beauty of sound, the ideal sound for everything he played. And so just by observing and then talking with him, and that would be and listening to his sound, that spurred you to search for your own. So it was an amazing experience. And the one thing that Cicolini and Badura-Skoda had in common, both of them, even though they were very different, but both of them, they had the utmost respect for the text. They both stressed how musicians should really be humble servants of the composers, which of course doesn't mean you erase your own personality. And you still filter things through your own views and through your own background and sensibility and sensitivity. But you really, if you depart in any way from what's written, or if you feel that what's written on the text gives you some room for individual interpretation, which is often the case, but you really need to know what the text is, which of course brings about the question of finding good editions because you want at least a good starting point. But they tried to be really faithful servants of the composers.
That's wonderful. I was wondering if on top of your head, can you think of a most memorable experience performing or recording or teaching or anything related to your music career that you can think of?
Well, there would be so many, so many. I mean, if we talk about performing, um, aside from the Cleveland and Cliburn competitions, which have played a big role in my life, and also the Marguerite Long. But if we just talk about concerts, even before all of that, when nobody knew about me or my name, and I hadn't gotten started with anything really yet, I got an opportunity to play a full recital and debut recital in the most important recital hall in Italy, in Sala Verdi, in Milan. And that was I was so tense before that concert. I almost got fever before, just because of the nerves. It was very stressful. It was because at that time I hadn't done anything of that magnitude. But the concert went beautifully, and it was such a boost of confidence. It really made me realize I really can do this. You know, there is nothing that's gonna faze me anymore. And the warmth of the audience, I will never forget that. Then, of course, playing in Salle Pleyel in Paris, such a big hall, such a big tradition. Um, you know, Carnegie Hall and you know many other places like that have tradition. And when you walk in there, you feel the history and you feel all of the great artists that have preceded you. There have been many big cities I've played at or played in, and some of them are very special to me. Cape Town in South Africa, for example, a place I love, and there is such a connection I have with the audience there every time I play there, and with the symphony orchestra. It's marvelous. Shenzhen in China, where I often have played, Shanghai and Beijing as well. But I have to tell you, even small places have played a wonderful role in my career, in the sense of community you have with audiences when you go there. When After the Cliburn competition, there was an outfit, an organization that existed in America. It was called Community Concerts. It doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. I hope somebody does revive it. It got broken up into smaller pieces, but it used to belong to CAMI, Columbia Artist Management. And they had hundreds and hundreds of local branches, and they all got together, these community concerts, as an organization. The representatives of the local small towns all got together in regional conferences where they would listen to showcases and choose artists to present in their local venues. And so it was a network of presenters. I met some representatives of this organization at the Cliburn competition. They chose me, they invited me to perform some concerts for their organization. So I would basically fill dates between big cities. Like, say, I was playing in New York and then in Chicago, and I was traveling westward, and I would fill those dates with many stops in very small communities in states such as Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and so on. And then continue. I've done a lot of this that year, and I've played in places that most people in America don't even know. And I've met wonderful people. I've had the surprise. You know what they call flyover land? It's between, like, especially the people on the American eastern and western coast. They think everything in between is just flyover country, not important, not cultured. Well, I know for a fact that that's not so. And I'm not just talking about larger cities in the middle. I'm talking about smaller communities in the middle. You can always find beautiful venues, beautiful university recital halls, great pianos. Sometimes I was shocked that I went to a place like, for example, Minot in North Dakota. And I didn't know Minot, and then I go there and I find a lot of people who knew a lot about classical music. They had a Grieg festival. They had members of their university who used to be first violin in the London Symphony, or things like that. You cannot discount places just because they're small, you know. And that was something that I learned, and it was wonderful. And then when you go and play in these places, because they don't maybe have this same amount of cultural happenings in their places as the bigger cities do, when you do go there, they love having you there. They are so excited. They participate so much, and yeah, I've had countless wonderful experiences. I couldn't begin to even list them.
Yes. And then I want to ask you one more question. Do you have any advice for young artists who are trying to make their career in the profession right now?
Well, we live in different times than when I was growing up, and of course, I guess I would have said, you know, my elderly or older people than me would have said the same thing about me when I was a kid. Um, but the thing is, the world really changes exponentially faster. Um, and so, think about this: social media did not exist. The internet wasn't widely available when I was growing up. I didn't have cell phones until I was 20 years old. Um, and even then, it was those models that looked like bricks that you couldn't really carry in your pocket. But in any case, um, right now with social media, you can gain a lot more exposure. But while this is definitely a good thing, I think there is something negative about it because young kids just crave the exposure and want to be famous. And so they'll do anything to be famous. And then that's how you have so many people trying to go for a particular look rather than the substance of their musical knowledge and ability. So I'm not dismissing those who think they are either beautiful or handsome and don't shy away from showing it. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. To quote the musical Chicago, if you got it, flaunt it. But the first and foremost thing for me should be and remains what you can do as a musician, your knowledge, your skill, that you have to build patiently. So when you have talent and then you work hard and you build your skills and you really delve deep into the music you're playing, if you also have something else why people should notice you that could make you stand out, then why not?
Yes, I think social media is very important in these days and also could be problematic. But I think you're using the social media platform very well. I'm so grateful that we can see all your performances on YouTube, and then we get updated with your performances, upcoming projects on your Facebook, and then on your blog.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm
Yeah, I
looking
think it's a
forward.
great tool to have. And I love the fact that we have YouTube. YouTube is a good example of that. It is a veritable gold mine, but there is also plenty of trash in there. So one needs to be discerning, you know.
Yes, thank you so much for talking with me, and I look very much forward to all of your upcoming projects and your recordings and your performances.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course.